Number one, Ibble Dibble here. Hello, friends. Am I reviewing episode 1 of Confessions of a Female Founder with Meghan? Of course I am. If it's half as cringe as Archetypes, which I couldn't even finish, but might get around to eventually, no promises, I will be amused. Fair warning, this is a listen only video. I'm going to throw up a couple pictures just so you can put a face to a name, but you don't have to be watching the screen. It's honestly amazing to me just how bad an interviewer Meghan is. She did archetypes so she could try to make famous friends, and we see the retention rate. It's not good. Now she's doing Confessions of a Female Founder to try to learn why the fuck everything she touches turns to ash. And I genuinely can't wait to see if she can pick up and apply any nuggets of wisdom or not at all. Meghan's first guest is self made billionaire Whitney Wolf Herd, and their interview is absolutely fucking pointless. Whitney is such a good get for an interview that it's actually fucking amazing how little Meghan could get out of her. If you can't tell by my increased frequency of fucks per sentence, I am truly baffled. Friends, Whitney Wolf Herd is a literal legend with an incredible origin story, which Meghan didn't even ask about. So this video is just me telling you her origin story. I'm not even going to get into the nitty gritty, word for word, actual dumb interview with Meghan in this video. Reviewing this Whitney Wolf Herd episode is going to take me 2 or 3 videos. So the bulk of this video is going to be the juiciest decade-old millennial tech bro gossip you've ever heard, totally unrelated to Meghan. I promise there's a reason I'm getting into all of this. It's to highlight all the research Megs should have done and didn't, all the questions Meg should have asked but didn't, and ask my own questions. I have questions for Whitney. Credit where credit is due. Most of this first part of Whitney's story, which I'll call the Tinder piece, comes from original reporting by Jordan Crook, published in TechCrunch in July 2014. Less than 3 months after Whitney left Tinder and less than 2 weeks after Whitney filed her lawsuit against them for sexual harassment and discrimination. This expose was absolutely fucking legendary, mainly because all of the employees of Tinder at that time were so young and immature, and there was so much rancor among them that practically everyone in the office was an anonymous source for this TechCrunch article. It's linked below in the description box if you want to read it. And Jordan Crook would actually be a great guest for Meghan to invite on the pod because after 12 years building up an incredible little black book, interviewing VCs, founders, and every incubator's latest startup grant recipient, she hooked up with a Wharton grad and co-founded their own incubator called BetaWorks, which, quote, invests at the intersection of AI and gaming, end quote. If there's anyone who's seen enough successes and failures to notice a pattern and able to explain to Meghan at a 7th grade reading level the type of projects that have a chance at venture scale success, it's Jordan. I'm manifesting that for Meghan, if only for my own amusement. So back to Whitney. It's the end of 2011. Two 25-year-old USC tech bro besties, Sean Rad and Justin Mateen, are exiting their roles and looking for a new project to work on together. For reference, Sean had secured $5 million in VC funding for Adly, a celebrity endorsement platform that connected celebrities with brands, a really early high-end influencer marketing model, and had handed over the reins, while Justin was selling off Site Canvas, which was eventually purchased by Showit, which still exists, and is a drag and drop website builder akin to Squarespace. In 2012, Sean was hired into the Hatch Labs incubator, which was partially funded by IAC, the huge holding company founded by Barry Diller, with, I think, thousands of investments in over 100 countries, including controlling stakes or full ownership of tons of companies you know extremely well. It's honestly too huge and complex for me to even represent with just a couple examples of brands. But in 2024, a bad year for them actually. They did 3.81 billion in revenue on 6.28 billion in equity and 9.22 billion in assets, so a huge company. They ran Hatch Labs in partnership with Extreme Labs, which, to quote their mission statement, quote, leads the world's biggest brands in creating award-winning mobile products, end quote. In other words, apps. Sean was hired to develop Cardify, a credit card loyalty points app. And during a company-wide hackathon, he was paired with Joe Munoz, who was developing an interest graph backend that matched people with local shops based on their interests. The two joined these concepts, gamifying points accumulation and matching interests with sellers, to create a dating app, the very first version of Tinder. They called it Matchbox and pitched it mid-February 2012. The original pitch deck still exists somewhere in the ether if you're curious. I'm sure you can find it. In March 2012, Jonathan Badeen was hired to handle the front end of Cardify, and he is the man who soon afterwards invented the Tinder swipe. Chris Golchinski was hired the very next week, and he handled the design. At this point, the focus was on Cardify, not Matchbox. They worked out of Justin's personal office in New York, just because they liked New York better than the Hatch office in LA. So Justin was at that point not formally associated with what would become Tinder, but obviously knew what was going on with his best friend's projects in his own office. In May, Cardify launched at TechCrunch Disrupt, and Apple did not like it. It took 3 weeks for them to approve the app for the App Store, and it still exists, but it's since evolved into something totally different, a digital gift card marketplace primarily used in Africa. While they were sitting and sweating for App Store approval, they decided to build out Matchbox. At the same time, they were hiring marketing contractors to hopefully sell Cardify to merchants when it finally got approved, but they didn't have really high hopes for it, so it wasn't a very competitive process. Justin's little sister Alexa needed a job, so he recommended her to Sean, and she brought her friend Whitney, and they were hired as field sales reps and sent out on the road immediately. Whitney had no formal education in sales or marketing, and certainly none in tech. She was just Alexa's little friend. In many old articles about Tinder, they call them longtime friends, but that's not true. Alexa and Justin grew up in a mansion in Beverly Hills and were both legacies at USC. Whitney grew up in Salt Lake City, the daughter of a wealthy property developer and homemaker, wasn't the best student, and ended up at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, where she was a Kappa sorority girl who was interested in branding and fashion and recognized the power of yoking charitable causes to for-profit brands to drive revenue pretty early. By 2004, 5, 6, it was already common practice to send celebrities and tastemakers stuff for free in hopes they would wear it in public, because the right person getting photographed in something could make a brand. The most memorable example of this is Juicy Couture, which didn't get a lot of traction outside of Southern California boutiques until in 2002 or 2003, John Galliano started getting photographed a lot around Paris and London wearing the stuff they mailed to him for free. If I remember correctly, a t-shirt that said, "I love Juicy," or "Juicy loves Dior," or something like that. This was so long ago, I can't even find these photos on the internet. But this was his wife beater vest era, the first time the J'adore Dior t-shirts were introduced. Yeah. The Juicy founders also were Dior Couture clients at this time. And Dior Couture under Galliano was a stunning, artistic, revelatory money pit, constantly in danger of being shuttered. So perhaps there was a bit of a friendly quid pro quo there. Before that, the brand was considered Cali Camp Mid. There was lots of discussion around how dare they use the word couture. They're clearly not chambre syndicale. After that, it became acceptable in high society. They started making cashmere tracksuits, etc. Sorry to make a long story longer. I can't help it. Anyway, in 2007, Whitney's sophomore year at SMU, Lauren Bush co founded Feed. I'm sure you remember how trendy those burlap feed bags were to try to end world hunger. They're still in business today. They still sell tons of virtue signaling tote bags. Is it a genuine charity? Kind of. There's a for profit arm that gives a certain percentage of their profits to their charity arm, which is a legitimate 501c charity in the US. Since 2007, they've given $15 million worth of free meals to poor children throughout the developing world and in the United States. What percentage of their profit is 15 million over 17 years? Less than $1 million donated per year? I don't know. We don't know. That's not public information. It's a private company. But Lauren Bush Lauren at the time and still was publicly lauded in Vogue, Harper's, all the high-end mags, and the gossip websites of the time as a literal saint. To quote her Wikipedia page, for her work with Feed, she was named one of Fortune's most powerful women entrepreneurs in 2009 and one of Inc. magazine's 30 Under 30 in 2010. She also received the 2010 Accessories Council Humanitarian Award, the 2011 Stevie Award for Best Nonprofit Executive, the 2011 Fashion Group International Humanitarian Award, and the 2013 Women in Communications Award. In 2014, Lauren was named as one of Forbes' 30 Under 30 social entrepreneurs and one of Crane's 40 Under 40. Whitney saw this and mimicked it. After the BP oil spill, she started selling bamboo tote bags to benefit affected areas. Just like the burlap feed bag said feed, her bamboo tote said help us. On her Wikipedia page, Whitney very proudly announces that she partnered with celebrity hairstylist Patrick Alftenkamp on this project, but he wasn't really a celebrity hairstylist. He was part of Lilo's entourage, part of her glam squad. He wasn't juggling clients for the Oscars or something. He was photographed with her with some frequency, and there was speculation that they were hooking up. And her mother told TMZ, I think, he has nothing to offer her. He's not good enough for her. He uses her like a meal ticket, that kind of stuff. He seems to have split up with Lilo permanently around 2015. He also stopped posting on Instagram around that time and has since faded into obscurity. Anyway, Whitney somehow got a hold of Patrick, and they got these help us bags photographed on Lilo's little friends, Rachel Zoe, Nicole Richie. Whitney didn't get stalked at Kitson or anything, but I'm sure it helped her sell the bags to her sorority sisters back at school. Apparently, riding on whatever success they had with the help us bags, Whitney and Patrick launched another little maybe charity business, bit of faux charity business called Tender Heart, a t-shirt line to raise awareness around human trafficking and fair trade. I'm genuinely confused as to why she thinks it's a good idea to let this information remain on her Wikipedia page. How does she imagine this makes her look like a good person? And the next sentence is even funnier. To quote the page, quote, after graduating, Wolf Herd traveled to Southeast Asia where she worked with orphanages, end quote. I've dismantled the voluntourism industry before, using Meghan as an example. I don't even remember which video it was. If I can find it, I'll link it in the description box below and in a card above. But this is obviously virtue signaling nonsense. If she had spent any real amount of time, say the summer after graduation, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and worked with any reputable NGO as part of a structured volunteer program, she would say that. For example, after graduation, Whitney spent 12 weeks in Siem Reap with GVI, teaching English to young Buddhist monks 35 hours a week. The lack of specifics around her charity work is a similarity she shares with Meghan. Anyway, Whitney soon convinced her parents to finance her move to Los Angeles to try to make it. And that's where she met Alexa Mateen out and about on the rich girl party circuit. They knew each other for less than 2 years before they both started working together at Hatch. This is important because in her eventual lawsuit, she claimed she was immediately sent to do marketing on college campuses for Tinder, but everyone else says she wasn't even in the office when they were working on Tinder. She was in the field with Alexa selling Cartify. Tinder was ready by July, but it was still called Matchbox, which was too similar to Match.com, owned by investor IAC. So they had to think of a new name. This is another point of contention. Whitney swears she came up with the name Tinder. No one else who was there at the time will admit she did. Is that because she didn't, or is that because they hate her? I don't know, but it's very interesting. In August, after Tinder soft launched into the App Store, Sean arranged to bring on Justin temporarily, just for 2 months, to lead marketing efforts around the launch. They planned to do guerrilla marketing on college campuses, and they knew that Justin was just the person for it because when he was in school at USC, he had an extremely profitable side hustle, throwing huge parties, booking big name entertainment, lining up brand sponsors, and charging admission tickets. He would individually reach out to the frats and sororities and any influencers, mostly people who were popular in real life, not on social media. Remember, this was the late aughts. Justin told the girls to just get out there and do the same thing he did in college. He told the girls that for every college campus they visited, they needed to get 10 of the pretty popular girls on the app before hitting up the sororities, so they could demonstrate that pretty popular people are on the platform, not awkward, desperate people. At the same time, Justin blasted his own huge email list from hosting all of those parties and built up a couple thousand users. One witness to Justin's grassroots marketing efforts said that one night he saw Justin personally text 300 people asking them to download Tinder. Justin went the extra mile to keep his job and hosted the Tinder launch party at his parents' mansion. At the time, his brother Tyler was still a student at USC, so they got hundreds of people to show up to their pool party. To get into the party, you needed to be on the app. Hatch was happy with the reception and the numbers. They invested, and Justin and Whitney started dating around the holidays in 2012. It's unclear who pursued who. Justin had a history of hooking up with his little sister's friends. Other people at Hatch say Whitney told everyone she wanted to date Justin, putting out the feelers and hoping he would pursue. Soon they were a serious couple, supposedly in love, and Tinder was blowing up. Justin and Whitney went on a tag team tour of party schools. To quote Crook in TechCrunch, quote, Whitney might stand on a table in a fraternity and announce that there were 200 hot sorority girls on the app waiting for the men to sign up, then run to the sorority and tell them the reverse. They left a trail of stickers behind them in the best campus bars and the most exclusive nightclubs, end quote. The media was loving the new hookup app, and they were constantly contacted for interviews, which they gave. One issue that arose with this is that reporters always wanted to interview a founder or a co-founder of the app. Joe, the guy who invented the matching algorithm, was already gone working elsewhere, so he didn't give interviews. Sean, of course, introduced himself and did interviews as a founder. But John, the guy who invented the swipe and handled front end, and Chris, the designer, noticed that they were never or very rarely asked by Tinder's PR to handle interviews. Perhaps not expecting an engineer and designer to be the most well-spoken company representatives, PR typically handed over interviews to the marketing team, Justin, Whitney, and Alexa. Justin started calling himself a co-founder and got away with it because he was Sean's best friend. And Whitney started calling herself a co-founder and got away with it because she was Justin's girlfriend. She even had business cards made up that said co-founder/VP of marketing on them. And she had co-founder in the email signature she used for everyone except Sean. Sean, a young guy in a very tough social scenario, was inconsistent in calling them out on and disciplining them for this behavior because they were his tightest friend group and yet kind of taking advantage of him, but also because he thought perhaps it would be better for business. Whitney told them it would be better if she could introduce herself in interviews as a co founder because a hookup or dating app with a friendly female face is much more broadly appealing than one exclusively run by young, rich LA dude bros. Sean agreed, so he let her do it. But when Alexa, Justin's little sister, asked to do the same, she was told no. Whitney's title was just for the press. Everyone knew she wasn't really a co founder. But Whitney started acting like she was inside and outside the company. In her most insane move, she asked Tinder PR to get her an interview with one of the big fashion mags. The best one they could get was Harper's Bazaar. Then, in the interview, she not only characterized herself as a co founder, but so greatly exaggerated her role in the birth of Tinder that Harper's ran the article titled The Woman Who Invented Tinder. Tinder PR assumes this was some kind of mistake, so they called Harper's to make a correction. And then Whitney called Harper's to correct their correction. And then Tinder PR called Harper's to correct Whitney's correction on their correction until finally they landed on the title How to Tinder. One of Tinder's co-creators, Whitney Wolf, shares her tips for using the app successfully. This was apparently Sean's last straw, and in a C-suite meeting, he admonished her in front of the others for using the title co-founder and told her she could no longer use it because it was causing confusion in the media and internally at Tinder, where all of a sudden everyone was asking to be acknowledged as a co-founder. Apparently, hoping to keep her job, Whitney sent Sean a flurry of apologetic emails. In April 2013, the company incorporated and equity was split among all employees. Multiple lawsuits after the fact, not just Whitney's. All of these original employees who received equity in April 2013 are the only ones permitted to call themselves co founders. One kind of wacky and weird thing Whitney did, she got married in September 2017, and right after she returned from her honeymoon, immediately went around to all the publications that had covered her at Tinder and asked for removals, rewrites, corrections, edits, editor's notes added, whatever she could get. It's just odd because she got her settlement from Tinder in September 2014. So it took her 3 years. Who knows? Maybe she was thinking of her legacy, her future children. Maybe her husband's lawyers did it as a little wedding gift for her. Maybe, like Meghan, she just thinks she can rewrite history and makes a habit of it now, waiting just long enough for people to forget and then going back and trying to change things. On November 11th, 2017, Harper's Bazaar kindly published a new article titled How Whitney Wolf Herd Transformed the Way You Date and Network at the Grand Age of 24. And just 4 days later, on November 15th, 2017, TechCrunch updated their original coverage saying, quote, Wolf Herd provided comment while declining to provide additional on-the-record comments or evidence to TechCrunch in response to this story. This is Whitney's statement. Whitney Wolf Herd categorically denies many of the allegations made about her in this article, and several elements of this article in pertinence to Wolf Herd are inaccurate. Again, she doesn't name which ones, she doesn't give any proof. She is, was, and will always be a co-founder of Tinder, as the courts decided, and that cannot be disputed. The negative allegations from anonymously sourced statements about her behavior, this is where it gets fun, as a woman and as a professional, are completely unfounded and offensively misogynist. Moreover, the timelines and alleged quotes contain multiple inaccuracies. Already said that, Whitney. Wolf Herd did not participate in this article. We know, everyone else did. And her statement on the events was previously not accounted for until November 15th, 2017. Right. She didn't respond to it at the time of publishing. But back to spring-summer 2013. Tinder was blowing up with millions of new users per month, and all of a sudden, Sean, Justin, Chris, John, Whitney Alexa and Joe were living the high life in 20 and $30 million mansions, throwing ruckus company parties where boundaries were definitely crossed. And things went swimmingly until around October when Justin and Whitney started fighting in the office. According to one anonymous employee who sat next to them at a nearby restaurant for lunch and pretended they weren't hearing what was going on, Whitney wanted to slow down, get married, and have babies. Justin told her Tinder would always come first. So stupid. In December, Whitney and her friends took a girls' trip to Aspen. And while she was there, she met the man she is now married to, Michael Herd, heir to an oil fortune. Worth billions, they have over 400 wells in Louisiana and Texas. In her lawsuit, Whitney stated that she definitively broke up with Justin in December, but there doesn't appear to actually have been any definitive breakup at all, just lots of extreme on and off drama. There was definitively, provably quite a bit of overlap between Whitney's husband and Justin. At a party thrown for Tinder by Glamour magazine on February 3rd, 2014, Whitney got blackout drunk and started announcing to Justin and everybody else that she was going to fuck him that night. Perhaps embarrassed or who knows what, he declined, at least in front of people. She went home alone, but then texted him that she thought there were people trying to get inside her house and she was scared. Worried about her, he and his friend drove to her house, walked up to the door at the same time. His friend knocked on the door and she opened it naked and was very embarrassed because she was only expecting Justin, who told his friend to leave and stayed the night. In March, they were still fighting in the office. Apparently, Whitney would normally be the one initiating these conversations. To quote an employee, quote, Justin kept telling her not to do this in the office, but she wouldn't let up. Eventually, Alexa Mateen stood up and told Whitney to not discuss personal drama in the office. Whitney told her that if she ever got involved again, she would kill her. End quote. But here's where it gets really interesting. Whitney may have seemed like the instigator if you were just working in the same office space as them. But Justin was sending her nasty ass abusive text messages, accusing her of cheating on him, acting like a whore, telling her not to talk to men he didn't like, including investors he thought were sleazy, even though she was the VP of marketing. The most generous interpretation of this situation is that Justin was sexually harassing her, which he was, provably, absolutely, undeniably was. And that when she confronted him in the office, she was just doing her best to contain the situation in an obviously too casual workplace where boundaries were never drawn. In her court papers, Whitney claimed she was stripped of her co-founder title just for being female. She said Sean and Justin told her having a woman co-founder made the company seem like a joke. Further, quote, although it is tempting to describe the conduct of Tinder's senior executives as frat-like, it was in fact much worse. End quote. Her lawyer goes on to detail how every day was a barrage of horrendously sexist, racist, and otherwise inappropriate comments, emails, and text messages. Among Justin's appalling texts, he accused her of being a gold digger who slept with middle-aged Muslim men and told her he would get Sean to fire her if she talked back to him. It was no secret that Justin and Sean were like this. Just before Match Group floated Tinder on the New York Stock Exchange, valued at $3.1 billion, by the way, Sean did an interview with the London Evening Standard and they threw him a softball question. What attracts you to a girl? And he answered, sodomy. He said he was addicted to Tinder. He fell in love with a new girl every other week, and that at present a famous supermodel was begging him for sex. Chris Gulchinski, the original designer, frequently clashed with Justin and Sean over their behavior and this atmosphere. He told the Daily Mail, quote, my best memory of Tinder is the day I left. The general attitude and management style was bad. The people that work there are fantastic, but I don't have any kind words to say about Sean. He was wildly immature and inexperienced. I think he had his own best interests in mind. They were just a couple of spoiled little rich boys, if you ask me. He said the pair would brag about their conquests in the Monday morning directors meeting and then joke about sounding the HR alarm. Quote, the app has a reputation of being a hookup app, and I guess that's a reflection of who runs it. There's absolutely no place for that kind of attitude, especially in a professional workplace that has the eyes and attention of such a large part of the population. I think it's completely irresponsible. People deserve better, and the people that work there deserve better. Chris Gulchinski's girlfriend, Sarah Mick, was hired for 6 months in 2013, right after the app first went live, as the vice president of design. And she said, quote, it was a really sexist environment, very much a boys' club, and very immature workplace. That made the job intolerable in the end. I heard so many unprofessional things, lots and lots of comments between Sean and Justin about women. I remember having to find the model who would be the mock up model for the app. We ended up looking through people who Justin had either dated or slept with, pulling their photos from Facebook. He was like, let's look through photos of people I've hooked up with and find like the hottest girl. There was a billboard that went up on Sunset and her photo was on it. I think he might have texted her and said, hey, I'm going to use this, but there was nothing official. It had to be quickly removed because we didn't have intellectual property rights to use her image. When I first started, there were only 2 other women working there. Editor's note, obviously, Whitney and Alexa. And Sean said they had hired a third mom to the office and asked if they would be getting baked cookies every day. Justin laughed and said they should. That was my first day. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, like maybe it's a one-time thing. But every day I would go home, I would tell Chris how unprofessional and how insulting it all was. I was insulted by 90% of what they said to me. For the women, there was this sexist environment, and for men, there was this elitist environment. I'm not trying to exaggerate, but in a typical day, I would say pretty much the entire day I felt uncomfortable. Whether it was a meeting where inappropriate stuff was said, or a meeting I wasn't invited to specifically because I was a woman, or if it was because there were comments made between Sean and Justin in front of me about women, or whether it was because I was overhearing or witnessing some weirdness between Whitney and Justin, with Justin being very strange to her. I mean, it was absolutely every single day, almost every single interaction. A lot of the things that were thrown out in the lawsuit, I either witnessed or similar things happened to me, so all of that is totally true. Chris had been complaining quite a bit, telling Sean, I don't like the way things are going at Tinder, it's not a good environment. Sean and Chris talked it out, and Sean said to Chris, I think you would be better off if you went your own way. I came in the room and said, I may not have been as vocal about it, but there are major, major issues here, and I don't see them getting fixed. He said, I will always be the final voice of Tinder, and if anybody has any dissent to that, they're gone. I just said, okay, then I choose to leave. So again, to be clear, there is absolutely no doubt that Whitney worked in a toxic, sexist environment and was sexually harassed daily, probably multiple times a day, by her semi-ex or ex-boyfriend. In a text message to him, she calls him a half-boyfriend. That said, some ex-Tinder coworkers holds the cynical opinion that at some point she started purposefully winding him up, and they only realized later it was to get hard evidence with witnesses for her lawsuit. Because sometime at the end of February, Michael Herd from Aspen hired and paid for a lawyer for her. So for at least a month, she was strategizing her exit with a lawyer, and perhaps for longer before that, while she was on again, off again with undeniably inappropriate, abusive Justin. On April 6th, the same day as the Tinder Malibu party, Justin told his friend group / coworkers that he had just found out Whitney had an affair with another man while they were together, presumably her current husband. Whitney knew he knew, and when she showed up to the party, she walked up to their group, yelling at them not to conspire against her and talk shit about her. Alexa, her perhaps at this point ex-friend, went inside, and Whitney started physically attacking Justin. Sean pulled her off of him, and Whitney claims in her lawsuit that Justin called her a whore in front of their coworkers. The coworkers claim they didn't hear it. Justin went inside the house. Sean asked Whitney to leave, Then Whitney went inside the house and physically attacked Sean's girlfriend, who, by the way, at that time was Alexa Dell, the daughter of Michael Dell, Dell Computers. She went on to marry somebody else. And Alexa Dell spit on her. Oh my God. Whitney screamed, "I'm done with this. I'm done with all of you," and walked out. And everyone at the party took that as her resignation. In her complaint, she claims she was forced out of the company by Sean. Obviously, they said she forced herself out and quit. Whitney filed her lawsuit for sexual harassment and gender discrimination not 2 weeks later. They settled out of court for the relatively paltry sum of just over $1 million and some more stock than she was originally entitled to as one of the first employees when they incorporated in 2013. Some say her settlement was so small because she was not a perfect victim. My guess is that her settlement was so small because she refused to sign a non-compete for a huge chunk of cash. In her little conversation with Meghan, Whitney characterizes herself as lost in the world, a damsel in distress who just wanted to launch a female friendship app where people complimented each other, having come out of such an abusive relationship and toxic workplace. That may be a little true, but it's mostly bullshit. Whitney flew to Mykonos with Andrei Andreev, the billionaire founder of Badoo, which at that time was a very popular dating site in Europe and South America, and a handful of poached Tinder employees, including Sarah and Chris. Just 3 weeks after leaving Tinder, and they co-founded Bumble less than 3 months later. Love a mutiny in the valley. Andre and Whitney had first met about a year earlier. Did he swoop and scoop, or had they been planning this? And for how long? Was Michael in on this? Michael might be a bigger feminist than Whitney. What guy looks at this and is like, yep, that's wife material. Amazing. Not unironically, in 2020, Andreev sold Badoo, including his huge stake in Bumble, to Blackstone for $3.2 billion. And one of the conditions of sale was that Whitney would run not just Bumble, but Badoo, Lumen for the over 50s, and Chappie for the gays. But before he did, Forbes ran an expose quoting 13 different former female Badoo employees, alleging Badoo was a misogynistic and hostile work environment for women. In the expose, a former female employee says that she was pressured to watch video of a male colleague receiving oral sex from a prostitute, that the firm never investigated sexual harassment complaints made to HR by female employees, that sexual banter was commonplace in the office, that Andreev personally made frequent comments about women's appearance using sexist language and encouraged his managers to do the same, that the company's female marketing officer was told to quote unquote act pretty for investors and was once asked to give a job prospect a massage to sweeten the offer. And on top of all the sexism, he was casually racist pretty frequently. Predictably, Andreev replied with a statement that he was shocked and saddened by these inaccurate accusations. And Whitney issued a statement saying she was, quote, mortified by the allegations, but firmly behind Andre, who I consider my family and one of my best friends. End quote. She said she had, quote, never seen or heard any of the behavior, though I would never challenge someone's feelings or experiences, end quote. Andreev replied that he was sad and hurt that they never told him. He told Fortune magazine, quote, I think Whitney and management will have a lot of things to do to implement the recommendations of Doyle Clayton, end quote. Doyle Clayton is a British firm specializing in employment law, hired to independently audit these allegations. Anyway, these are all things to explore in the next part of this episode review when we talk about Bumble, the business that made her a billionaire at 31. Can you believe that in Meghan's interview, this whole origin story, Whitney's whole come up, was not even addressed. I have about 10,000 questions I would like to ask Whitney before we even get into Bumble. Don't you write all your questions for Whitney in the comments below so we can speculate on them together in the next video. Just off the top of my head, things I would have asked. What's your stance on workplace relationships now? Should they be prohibited, governed, hidden? Do you think it's necessary or possible to define and enforce workplace codes of conduct better in pre-incorporation startups? Do you think the idea of using everything you've got as a woman because the odds are already stacked against you as a woman is essentially feminist? Or is it just a selfish excuse? What is your general impression of tech bro culture? Do you consider enduring it a necessary evil to becoming a billionaire because it's really one of the only routes there? Do you think you have an advantage as a woman because these tech bros are relatively easier to manipulate? Do you value being a billionaire? If a billion wasn't the magic number, what is the magic number for you and why? And what do you plan on doing with it? Do you have any moral stance on the structures you've witnessed that accelerate wealth inequality? Would you do it all over again? You had very limited experience with marketing coming into the job, and it seems like you didn't get a lot of on-the-job training either. How did you develop your marketing strategy? How did you improve your techniques? Did you bring in experts? Did you crowdsource from users? Did all the customers just come to you because a good product sells itself? A big hurdle for a lot of entrepreneurs is understanding the consequences of taking on different types of investors at different times. Were you privy to or involved in funding rounds, forming strategic partnerships in any way, or did IAC kind of take care of all of that for you? Did you purposefully use press like Harper's Bazaar to sow chaos within Tinder, or as a strategy to get more out of your exit at Tinder? Or was it just resume padding that snowballed unexpectedly? Do you think you're demanding to be called a co-founder forced Sean and Hatch to distribute equity more fairly at incorporation? Do you still believe it's a good thing for young, early employees, co-founders, to use the press to raise their profile within their own organization and even try to change their organization's power dynamics in their favor? Or were you just a young thing playing with fire? Do you have a playbook for women exiting a toxic workplace? Were you too young to know how to handle this properly and would behave totally differently now? Or was the culture so toxic this was inevitable? Do you have a playbook for women exiting an okay workplace who just want to maximize their exit? What are your thoughts on the damsel in distress play? Do you think this was the only possible exit for you at Tinder? Do you think this was the best possible exit for you at Tinder? As living proof that becoming a billionaire is a lot more about who you know than what you know, how did you approach networking? Was it very strategic, or was it a meet everyone once approach? Many successful businesswomen clearly operate with an internal locus of control, but pretend they experience an external locus of control. Do you do that because you genuinely believe people find it more palatable and relatable, or do you do that so they never see you coming? And if you do that so they never see you coming, do you think it regresses the feminist cause in any way, or do you think people who underestimate women in business deserve to have it leveraged against them? Did you care if you were or were not a breadwinner? Or did you really want to marry someone worth as much as you are or more? How do you decide which conversations to delegate and which conversations to have personally? Did you ever make things right with Alexa Mateen? Okay, I think that's a solid 4 minutes of just me asking questions Meghan should have asked, but I could probably come up with 25 minutes more of that. All right, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I will see you soon for the second part of this review. Toodles! Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.